Hi, everyone, and welcome to Khalid and Laura. We're taking a look at community as brand, and I think we should start by defining what community is and what community isn't. So, Laura, could you start us off? When I say community, what does that mean to you?
Sure. So community is really a loyal group of people. So it can be internal, it can be external, but it is building that advocacy, building that loyalty, and building a good relationship to give and take.
Khalid?
And then maybe I'll take what it's not. And I think community is not transactional. So at Stack Overflow, where we have 100 million people visiting our website, this community of developers and technologists, it is very much a symbiotic relationship. We go to them directly for feedback. When we evolve our products, we go to them first and we ensure that we're bringing them along. And so I think community, what it's not, and what I think we'll spend some time talking about, it's not a loyalty program. It's not just your customers. It's something that is critical to your business and the evolution of your business as well.
And is it fair to say you could test community if people feel a part of something? Like, what's the test? Because that word can be thrown around a lot. Our community says, or we have a great community. How can you test when you know it's right and it's real?
Well, you make a good point. A lot of people throw out the word community. We're part of a community. We're building a community. But it is a feel. It's hard to measure, but a community is about what you are enabling of others, and it is giving back to you as well. So there's a lot of feel around it. There's a lot of benefit to it. Because of that honest relationship, the long-term relationship, as you said, it's not transactional. It is building a long-term relationship, and you get that benefit back and forth with each other.
Khalid, maybe you can share with us how you build community and then maintain it, because it's a lot of work. It just doesn't happen on its own. So if you could share an example, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First, at a very high level, I think so much of community building is about communication, over communicating, and then have a multi-pronged communication strategy. It's not just social media or email. It's really having like a one-to-one conversation mechanism and a one-to-many. And so one example of how we continue to invest in and nurture the community is every year we run what we call the Stack Overflow Developer Survey. One of the largest of its kind. Folks like VMware and others sort of base OKRs on it to some extent because it's that powerful. About 90,000 or 100,000 people take it every year. And it would be one
I just have to say, wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of
very
people.
difficult to achieve.
And give us 20 minutes of their time for free. And so it would be one thing to ask for their input and to publish the results. But we take it a step further in pursuit of nurturing the community, and we give them all of the raw data. And so what community looks like and what engagement looks like is folks are building their own data models. They're running reports. They're going through it on YouTube. And that's because they truly feel part of it and the longevity of Stack Overflow and the developer community or ecosystem more broadly.
And what are some of the things people will do in this community? What would they come to the community for? What might they share?
I think opinions, for better or for worse, right? Like that's the thing about community is that it is not transactional, and it doesn't mean that they like evangelize you all the time. I think that it's a conversation always, and so direct feedback, really candid feedback also, and so I think that's what it's about.
Yeah, and having someone else to share an experience with. I think we're all looking for that ultimately online at large. Laura, would love to hear your experience growing a community and maintaining that.
Yeah, so a couple of examples. So before VMware, I was with GitHub, also very focused on the developer community. And that was when I left, 74 million developers all in a community together. And we used Stack Overflow information. I know it went both ways. And that was helping all developers to really be one community. And so meetups are very simple ways to get started for anybody that's new into the business. Those are some of the simple ways. But then I take it to the opposite side at VMware, where we have a much more established business. And we have what we call our VMware user groups. And you would not always define a user group as a community. But because these groups have really built their own communities within all of their own countries, cities, they have managed to create this loyalty amongst themselves and to VMware, and they get together and they give us feedback, and we hold events and they talk to us in real talk. We talk to them in real talk. And so it's 100,000 plus members but all within their own little communities based on where they're located or what their interest is. And it's this admiration that they are so loyal to VMware, they want to help us and we want to hear it.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned meetups. Can you share what that looks like and how big they are, how small they can be?
Yeah, so it can vary. A meetup is, think of a cool place, maybe something like this, but much smaller.
It could be a bar, right? It could be at an event.
Absolutely. Or at a pier or somewhere that's just different. I wouldn't necessarily always recommend just a hotel setting. And you get people together for an interesting topic. And it's not just to have a beer. It is to discuss something of interest. You can have someone interesting there to be part of it. You can be sponsored by somebody. That's always a way to be able to help cover the costs. But it is getting people together, again, of common interests that want to learn from each other.
Mm-hmm. Khalid, how much does the community do on their own and it just happens once they've been brought together versus how much can a brand support, guide, or shape the community?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it totally depends on the community and the brand, but I do think one thing that companies have to sort of figure out is who within the company owns community engagement. And so, we have a big enough community that we have a dedicated community team, for example, but there are companies where it lives under marketing. And, I think it's really paramount that folks that are engaging directly and informing the community strategy have experience with communities because it's complex. And the decisions that you make as you're building and nurturing your community inform your product strategy, not just for that fiscal year, but for the entire, genesis and longevity of your company.
What does a community team look like? How many people might be on it? Again, obviously, there's the big companies, but if you could kind of share that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think you can have community managers, like a bench of folks who are directly embedded in the community, engaging with the community. Maybe we're hired from the community at a company like Reddit. I think that's probably what it looks like. But I think more than anything, you need one central person that can act as a liaison to product, to sales, to marketing, have a direct line to the CEO if there's ever an issue with the community that needs to be discussed. So someone who is both strategic and has an ability to execute, but more than anything knows how to talk to cross-functional peers.
How important is it that leadership understands community and the value of it to the brand and the work?
It needs to start from leadership because otherwise you don't get the investment because you can't always measure it. And the leader isn't necessarily the spokesperson for your community because your community wants to talk to their peers. And so by having your CEO or your talking head be that person, that is not authentic. There can be times we bring our CEO in at times because they want the exposure, but that's not who is running the communities. That's not who the everyday person is. And so, but he sees it, he feels it, he gets the feedback, he feels the love, and that helps to advocate for investing in our communities and supporting our communities.
Khalid, I'm curious, how do you as a CMO interact with community?
Constantly. Every time I wear my little T-shirt on the subway or at the gym, a community member comes up to me and says,
Really?
"Hey, do you work at Stack Overflow?" That's
happens. Amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah, most of the time. And then, people reach out to me directly with feedback, and then through marketing activities like the developer survey, at conferences like this, at meetups. I think it's so important not only to laser focus, we're marketers, so we have to, on quantitative data and brand tracking surveys and everything else, but just to have conversations constantly. And I think that's what was so tough over the past few years, to not have these one-to-one and face-to-face interactions, and that's so important.
When you say one-to-one, you mean face-to-face, that you might grab a coffee with someone, or I guess navigating lockdowns that was on video, but What does that look like one-to-one? How much time might you spend with a member of the community?
A lot. I think in the same way that I think it's really important that people spend time with their customers, understand customers large and big, not just when they're having a pain point or when they're highly engaged and ready to shoot a customer story, but just this is direct feedback that will evolve our roadmap. And I think the same thing with community members.
Laura, in your role, how do you work with community?
So community is a big part of who marketing is because our community influences so much of what we do. We have online communities and we have in-person communities. And then I would also add that we have internal communities We have all of our employee resource groups, and those are communities. I happen to be the executive sponsor of our women's we call them pods, Power of Difference, but that's our ERG. And it's a sense of belonging internally. It's finding people like you. That's the same thing externally with our communities. And I want all of our communities to feel a sense of belonging to VMware. So we're not marketing to them, we are helping them. We are possibly giving them resources. We are bringing in speakers. We are hosting programs. So there's a wealth of programs that we have. We also have developer advocates throughout the company and in different locations throughout the world. I would say if you're a smaller company or a newer company, having at least one person in different geographies really does help you, because they can be that person, feet on the street, local, can really help you connect more and help build those communities as well.
And do you give that person in the different communities or the leaders something extra like swag or more time? How do you recognize the leaders that are really engaged and want to help?
Everyone loves swag.
I had to ask, yeah.
Everyone loves swag. My GitHub days stickers were probably the hottest commodity in the world, and you couldn't go anywhere without. I carried stacks of them with me. Today, it's more hoodies and things like that, but swag, absolutely. And you want to be wearing it. You're recognized wearing your swag, absolutely. It helps with that loyalty, that pride.
And Khalid, what about you? What do you give folks who are involved? What are they looking for?
Yeah, my Iowa accent's going to come out when I say swag, my long A.
By the way, that
so
means stuff we all get. In case you're wondering what swag means, not only is it something when you're walking, but it's stuff we all get.
Yeah, the new term now is branded merchandise, because it feels a little more expensive and more sustainable too. So, I think one really critical point there that you mentioned is that so much of community building starts with employee engagement. And I think a lot of companies take that for granted. I mean, we're reading all of these articles about quiet quitting, loud quitting, no motivation Monday. And the reality is that some of the biggest champions of your product, some of your most vocal community members often work within your company. And I think that folks sometimes take that for granted, and it plays out in a really negative way. And so employee engagement is so critical, and like Laura said, there's a huge role for marketers and senior leaders to play in that, and sort of connecting the dots between community members and employees.
So you mentioned earlier customers, and that there's a difference between customer service, engagement, and community. I would love some clarification on that, when they're separate, when they might overlap. Laura?
So you have your customers. They are paying customers, and in some instances, someone has told them you are going to use said product, said tool, solution, and that's fine. That's great. They are users of your technology. Community is much more than that. It's not just this is to do my job. You want your community to really help you succeed. You want your community to engage with you, to feel that loyalty. And not only that, if they move on to another company, you still want them to be an advocate for your business no matter where they go. And our community can help you with credibility. They can help you either be influencers or external speakers for you, and you may not even know it, or they may ask for input, but they have so much value to provide, whereas a customer is that paying, using, important, and you want to get them to that point of loyalty and community.
So community at Collision might look like one of the speakers mentioning your brand on stage. You didn't ask them to. They are just out there evangelizing, saying, this is a great product, check it out. Like that would just come from someone not being a customer, but
that's more helping someone be an influence. It depends how they're engaged with the company.
Okay.
It's not just being a spokesperson or tweeting something. It really is being part of it, attending programs, giving feedback, talking to people about you, really loving everything about you. So when they talk about their job, their business, whatever it might be, you happen to come up, and you are almost part of their identity.
Khalid, customer versus community, what's the difference?
I totally agree with what Laura said. I think that something that we're focused on as a SaaS company, we have this product Stack Overflow for Teams, which is a private instance of Stack Overflow, is community building within our companies. And so banks and technology companies will have 20,000 seats. And we really work with the customer to identify the influencer within the company or the power user, the person who really evangelizes the community, and say, okay, let's get them on video. Let's create an infographic that can be hung around the break room if you're in person. Let's send 10,000 stickers or 10 hoodies or host an internal hackathon. And so I think customers are customers, but there's an opportunity to create them into community members and build community within the companies.
Yeah, connection, relationships, that's what I'm hearing is essential to community. Community can also be a double-edged sword, and I'm sure there are a lot of folks who are thinking about risk and when the community is asking for things that the company can't deliver. So let's explore that a little bit. Current example is Reddit, and communities and leaders within communities having strong points of view and taking things in their own direction, which might be different than the company's vision. So, Khalid, double-edged sword, how do you navigate that?
It's not easy, and I don't have like a silver bullet answer to any of this. I think the thing that's really tough is that some of the most tenured members of a community, ours, for example, who have been contributing to our website for 15 years.
Can I just say, that's amazing. 15 years committed to this community.
Yeah, 2008 feels like 50 years ago at this point. And so I think that sometimes how those folks see the community or the evolution of the community can run in conflict with, what the company does or what newer members of the community see. And so often you'll see a community may be more intersectional over time. It may be more geographically diverse than it once was. And that means that the tone of how community members engage with one another, the mechanisms and channels with which they converse can be quite different. And so I think it goes back to communication. You really have to say, here's where we are today, and here's where we're going. We want to bring you along, but there are going to be times when that conflict is insurmountable, I think. And I think Reddit is seeing that play out in a very real way in very real time because their business objectives are running counter to what some of their most tenured, most prolific contributors sort of see as the future of the company.
And I think also, too, for key members of any community, they have given so much in terms of time and resources. That's why they're vocal, because they care, even if the business is evolving in a different direction. So I'd be curious to hear your take, Laura.
I would say in addition to that is also it's made their careers. Right. And so as the company has evolved and you've made your career on, I'll use VMware as on VMware's business, and then we're evolving and we want them to evolve and modernize with us, but they've made their career, and do they want to advance? And so we need to help them. So it is some of that, come along for the ride with us, trust us. We have trusted you, you have trusted us. And it's advancing them to think about new products, new opportunities. And so that is one of the things that we work on. Large community, 100,000+. Some of these people have been saying the same thing over and over for many years. And so you want to help them so that also when they are talking about us, they're talking about it in the more modern way because they are an extension to the company. Mm-hmm. So we see that as well. And then there's also just the topic of double-edged sword of what is it that is always being said. Everything internal is external. Everything external is internal. And they're privy to some really important conversations at times. And if they're going to go out in the public and say something, it may not be exactly what you wanted it to say, and you can't control that. And that's why it's important to have that open relationship, because that feedback is actually really good for you, but you have to be open to that feedback. And sometimes it's in the critical open eye.
So on that point, sometimes the community is speaking and they agree with each other. Other times it might be a few members of the community, and you'll hear someone at the office saying, well, the community says. Well, does the community say that? Or do a couple loudmouths say that? So, Khalid, how do you balance when the community at large is asking for something versus a moderator or versus someone who's been there since the beginning? Because not one person or a group of people necessarily speak for a community. If you have a great community, it should be diverse in so many different intersectional ways, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I think you have to hear them. I would say, you can't shut them down right away.
You can't say you're just one person.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't work. As I think some people are learning the hard way in real time. I think that you shouldn't let a select few sort of dictate or determine your strategy and drive you forward, especially if it's antithetical to your values or your mission or your vision. But what you have to do is respond very thoughtfully. I think first acknowledge that their point of view matters, as do their contributions over time. And then very clearly, again, because we work with developers and technologists, everything has to be rooted in logic, and we have to over-communicate and very transparently explain why we're doing something. And so we do try to do, we've made mistakes. I think everyone has. But we do our best to be transparent and to ensure that we're walking people through where we're going and why we're going there.
And when you say over-communicate, I assume because you're a marketer, you mean don't just say it once.
Yeah, repetition wins campaigns. I think the thing about technical marketing in particular, I did a lot of B2C work at an agency for a long time, and I was so used to listicles and 500-word content marketing pieces. When you're doing technical marketing or speaking to developers, like a 3,000-word blog post is totally fine. Actually, they welcome it. And so articulating our community strategy or our product strategy in a way that would make most marketers sort of tense up is actually the right thing to do.
Yeah. We're almost at time. My final question to both of you. We have an audience here, and I'm sure it represents many different communities within Collision. What advice do you have for someone, especially someone maybe who isn't at a big company, but wants to start exploring community, whether it's with employees or the people who use their product? Where do you start, Laura?
Do something. So that would be my first piece of advice. If you don't have communities, start internal. You have groups of communities within your business and find a way to support them. So start there. And then look to who you have. Do you have advocates within your business? And start at an easy place. If there are already advocates within your company, figure out where they are and start a meetup. Start something casual. Build an online community where maybe you can test it and be a little bit safer. But you definitely want to do something. Communities can really help you.
And when you mentioned ERG, just for folks who might not be familiar, that's an employee resource group.
Correct.
What might that look like? Could that be a group of employees coming together saying we want to talk about diversity, or people saying, hey, we want to march in pride? If you could just explain that for anyone who's newer in their career.
So we have many ERGs at VMware. We have women, we have our Black pod, we have our Asian pod, we have our Latin pod, we have our veterans pod, we have a disabilities pod, we want to build communities within our business. It's really important for people to be able to find commonality, and so we invest. And if we have programming all year round, we have leaders, so we will have women leaders. Like I said, I'm the sponsor, but I am not the person that runs it every day. We have people invested in running those programs. They bring in speakers. They host different programs. And each one of them is doing something very special for their community and inviting their allies.
Excellent. Khalid, your advice?
Yeah, I would say think long term, even from day one. No matter if you're a seed company, if you're 2 employees, if you're just a founder, I think have the conversation as you build the community about where you want to be in 3, 5, 10 years. Be aspirational and don't shoot yourself in the foot to say hey, what's feedback on our product and where it is today? Because what you want is to be an enduring institution, and talking long term and sort of planting the seed today and building that community from there is really important.
That's great advice. Also, we're all parts of communities, so it's helpful to pay attention when you're in a community and it feels special and you want to spend more time. Take those notes and think about how you can bring it to your business, whether you have a startup or whether you're part of a larger brand, because I think we know when it feels good and we feel heard, we want to do more ultimately for that community. And you can teach us the best stuff about community is when we're in it and working with others. Thank you so much, Khalid and Laura, for your expertise. And thanks to the audience for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.